As a small content creator that reviews games, a lot of the time if I want a review key for a game, I have to reach out to developers myself to ask for keys for games. A lot of the time I get just completely ghosted, but sometimes, completely unprompted, out of the blue, I'll receive an email from a game dev asking me to cover their games. And look, these games are usually from very small indie teams or solo developers just looking to shoot their shot, and the quality of these games can be, to put it in the nicest way possible, questionable. But I thought, why not let them shoot their shot? So I have 7 more games to play today that I have pulled from my email, and we're just going to see what we get. Links to all of the games we look at will be in the description in case you want to check them out, and we're just going to go in order of which I played them. So let's start off with Marblearium. Marblearium is described as a laid-back marble adventure with satisfying physics and lo-fi beats, and for the most part, it lives up to that description. I was a bit concerned about picking this one up because I wasn't sure what I would be able to say about a game where you roll around a fairly linear track as a marble. But I'm glad I did because I actually kind of liked this demo, although the first 5 and last 5 minutes of this demo were kind of rough. So the version of the game I played was a pre-release build of the public playtest, which is why I wasn't really surprised to see the main menu being littered with big red "this isn't ready yet" and "not hooked up yet" text just written all over the place. Anyway, let's talk about the actual game. Marblearium has a bit of a rocky start, and I'll admit physics of the marble weren't quite what I was expecting, and adding on to that worry was the music, because the music starts off with this like 5 to 10 second piano loop that loops in a very obvious spot, and immediately I was just thinking to the last time I did this, and I was like, oh god, did I just stumble into another game like Yasuke? Thankfully though, the game smooths out, and as I started to acclimatize to the physics and the music gradually started adding instruments and it stopped looping, the game started to win me over. So let's talk about the good. Marblearium's biggest achievement is its ability to pair some pretty neat visuals to the music of the game, and that's why, even though I'm a bit iffy on the overall gameplay, I think there's a solid idea behind this. There are some hiccups visually, most notably the depth of field not working as intended sometimes, but there are some great visual set pieces that try to invoke this good old feeling of 90s nostalgia. And at times it feels like you're playing inside of one of like Corridor Digital's satisfying render challenges. Also, I love how the developer utilizes the camera throughout the game. Where I think Marblearium needs work though is with the physics of its gameplay. The marble controls are not quite to my liking. It feels like the marble needs to feel a bit heavier, and speed on it needs to take longer to ramp up. There's also a jump button that feels very weird to use, and I can't put my finger on why, but it just doesn't feel like it fits into how the physics of the game should work, and I don't think the demo utilizes jumping in a meaningful way anyway. And I kind of feel like the sound effects of the marbles rolling is a little grating on the ears after a while. But other than those things, I like the demo. If the goal of the game is to be a relaxing marble-based adventure platformer, this isn't too far off. It does feel like the game is pretty early on in its development, so there is a lot of overall polish the game needs to go through. The last couple of minutes of the demo just kind of felt like there were a bunch of unrelated scenes just kind of jammed into the demo to kind of showcase some ideas, rather than being like a natural progression of how the game was going up until that point. That being said though, I'm hopeful for this one. Marblearium is not available yet. There is a playtest available to sign up now for if you're interested, but I'm not sure how long that one will be up. Now that we got to talk about a game with a bit of nuance, we're just going to be dropping all of that with our next game. Laserade's Sugar Rush. Look, I've played some terrible games and demos on this channel before, but this is definitely up there as one of the worst. Laserade is a rage game, and if the objective of this demo is to piss me off, then it did the trick. But I feel like a demo's function should be able to make me want to buy the full product, and this one doesn't. In fact, I'm going to do the opposite and tell everyone I know, including you lot, to steer clear. Although odds are nobody was ever going to be aware that this game existed if I didn't make this video, so I don't know, joke's on me I guess. The demo for Laserade fails not because of its bad gameplay, or the settings menu that barely works, or the terrible sound effects. I mean, it is bad for most of those things, but it is mostly terrible because the difficulty of this game starts off at 11. It expects you to land some pretty precise jumps, avoid laser drones that chase you down before you can even get a hang of the controls and how they feel, or even what you're really meant to do in the game. It's a disorientating experience for what is essentially a very simple, straightforward game. The demo only consists of this one very hard level, and it's shit. Look, even though I don't think this game is worth playing at all, I think it would have been better to start the demo off with something easier and then ramp up the difficulty into rage mode. What the developer has essentially done is put like a 4 meter high brick wall to climb as soon as you've entered the game, and there isn't any runway to get to learn to like the game before it's asking you to complete this ridiculous task. Which is why I think anyone who plays the demo will just exit and uninstall it after 5 minutes of playing if they get that far. Look, the demo and the full game are available now on Steam, but I don't recommend touching it. Next up we have Nightwater, which is a crafting and automation kind of game. Look, for a game with a pretty simple premise, I find myself having a tough time describing it. So it's got like the gameplay loop of your typical survival crafting games. You gather wood, stone, etc. to make workbenches to allow you to gather other resources. But progressing further in the game isn't tied to exploration, more towards gathering enough items to spawn a new biome. And eventually through progression, you spawn more and more biomes, and that's meant to like create a bridge towards the end of the game. I mean, it's a little different, which I like, but unfortunately the gameplay, in my opinion, feels a little bit bland, because it mostly all comes down to just going over resources and clicking on them and just waiting for them to disappear. Which I know is most survival crafting games, but it just doesn't feel like there's much satisfaction in it. The game is also pretty slow to get going, and I almost dropped it pretty early on, but I'm kind of glad I didn't, because sometimes in these new biomes they can have little mini games that you can do. The one in the demo was focused around having a small amount of time to cut down trees in a forest before you're kicked out, and it had kind of meta progression that you could upgrade yourself, so you could go in, cut down trees faster, or you can hit a tree and it would do AoE damage and poison other trees next to it that would also destroy those. And I got really addicted to this just one mini game. I probably spent more time in the mini game than I did in actual games. And that's probably just because I had a more satisfying and fast-paced dopamine rush focused gameplay loop, which is, I guess, proof that the whole game's gameplay system does have some merit to it, but I don't know, it's very strange. This was a weird demo. I think it's interesting, but it feels like the core gameplay loop is missing something. But again, if there are more mini games in the main game as addicting as the one in the demo, then actually there's probably something here. The art style is alright, the progression is somewhat cool, and it's got some good vibes. I don't think the game is probably for me personally. I'd be interested to see where the developers take this one. Also, this was the first game that I played that had a fully functioning settings menu, so props to them for that one. Demo is available now, with the game meant to release sometime later this year. Next up we have Prime Monster, a roguelike deck building card battler based around winning debates in Parliament, and everyone's a monster, I guess. Prime Monster has a decent and fun premise, and even though I don't really like playing many deck building roguelikes, I found myself pretty engaged with this one. The battle system is really cool. It is based around you being the leader of a political party, trying to sway and convince members of your party to vote on motions in Parliament. Sounds boring, but I think it's a pretty fun and unique battle system. I definitely think it could have used some more information on what the enemies are doing and what they're capable of, because it felt like, especially in the boss fight I was in, he just felt like he was just able to do things, and I didn't really know if the enemy was playing by the same rules and restrictions that I was. But other than that, there's a decent amount to like here. It's got great personality. The tutorial in the game was based around you trying to get a motion pass to end long and boring tutorials. I think that's pretty funny. Look, as a demo, it was pretty well crafted. There was enough time to get me acclimatized to the game, show me the systems at play, give me a tease on what's to come, and left me wanting more. Now, I did play this back in April, and since then Prime Monster actually has come out. So the demo is still up on the store page as of me recording this, so you can still try before you buy, but the full game is available now. Atomcraft is another survival crafting game, but this one has an almost Noita based world where every pixel of the game has kind of property and element of physics to it that can be harvested and mixed together. If you like mechanically dense games with quite a bit of depth to them, you're probably going to like this one. For me personally, I wasn't a fan of it, but I want to make clear that's more to do with my personal taste in games rather than the quality of the game itself. Look, I was loving some of the ideas behind this game. Having to grind up a flammable resource and then sprinkling it onto metal and lighting it on fire so it can get to a heat that makes the resource collectible is a really cool idea, but it's just a little bit too dense for me, and that feels like it requires me to remember too many things. And probably a bit of learning, considering it feels very sciencey, and I am not a very sciencey person. Not in a, I'm a spiritual person kind of way, more in a science was my least favorite class in high school kind of way. That being said, yeah, I can see people really enjoying this. The only thing that I think needs a bit of work is the UI and presentation. The pixel art style has its charm, but the menus and text in the game also commit to the art style, which leaves the text a bit difficult to read and not exactly pleasant to look at. That's all I really have to say on this one, so yeah, look, Atomcraft's demo is available now, with the full game slated to come out sometime in the middle of the year. Blue Dynasty is a tower defense / ARPG type game. I didn't mind this one. I think there is a decent premise here. The tower/base defense part of the gameplay is pretty simple. You are put in a scenario where you need to keep your town center alive and it must survive a certain amount of waves until you win. The ways in which you can set up the base is kind of limited to how the level wants you to do it, with the player's choice being more left into the order on which you want to build things. As the demo went on, it did look like the game was starting to offer a bit more player choice, but it more or less feels like each level wants you to play it a certain way. This is another game where I feel like there is a great idea for a game buried inside here, but I don't feel like this current iteration is what the game should be. Like, we get a player character to control during the waves, kind of like Sanctum, if anyone remembers that game. And this is where the game kind of falls apart for me. The gameplay is like Vampire Survivors gameplay, so you are mostly in charge of just moving your character while they auto-attack. You can press a button every now and then to activate a special ability. I'm not a fan of the gameplay. For me, it borders on boring. I had more fun building barracks and sending my soldiers around to defend my base rather than actually defending it myself. The player character also acts as your metagame progression with the ability to change weapons, upgrade gear and stuff between runs, which would be cool if it wasn't all tied to the part of the game that I just disliked the most. And this was definitely most felt when I got to the dungeon crawler side level that ditches the base building gameplay for just a straight dungeon where you just have to go around and collect a bunch of crystals and kill the boss at the end, which I thought was a neat idea, but just ended up being a showcase of all the things that I disliked most about the game. It just doesn't feel like there's much player agency in a control style like this. But also the controls would just bug out all the time and my character would just spin in circles for some reason. Look, it needs work, but again, this game seems like it is pretty early on in development. I don't think it's a total write-off. There are some good ideas here. The demo for this one is available though, but the game's release is TBD. Hopefully there's a bit of runway to tweak the gameplay a bit more, maybe make it a bit more active. The last game we have today is Particulitix, a name that I'm not going to write again into my script because I know I'm going to have a hard time saying it. This game is a roguelike-ish top-down shooter. It's got a bit of a Geometry Wars vibe to it. You're pretty much put into this arena and you need to survive the level. The gimmick being that the floors have bonuses on them like fast reloads or double damage or like double XP, and they kind of shift around the arena from time to time. From a base level, the gameplay is pretty decent. Everything seems to work as intended. It's simple yet fun. I like the art style, although there are a couple of problems with visual clarity, especially with the enemies. They all have like black borders around them and that doesn't really contrast well with the black background of the game. The game does have a palette swap feature that changes some of the colors of the game, but I couldn't find any that changed the borders in the background. Look, the gameplay is fine. I feel like the player character is a little bit too slow, and also enemies are a little bit too slow, and they could put it up to be a little bit faster, just at least during the early part of the game. There is one thing that I'm absolutely not a fan of in this game, and that it includes AI-made music. Now, you can toggle it off in the menu to, quote-unquote human-made music, which, look, I get it. I've talked about AI a few times on the channel, so I'm just going to make this really quick. AI can be used as a tool for sure, in some circumstances, but I don't think AI should ever be a substitute for human creativity. And the way I see it, people aren't really going to care if there is a toggle for the AI music or not. They kind of care if a developer used it in the first place, and there's a decent chance that you lose sales just on principle alone from some people. Everyone has their own lines in the sand that they draw for AI usage. Sometimes it's all or nothing, or sometimes they just don't give a shit at all. Overall, I do really like this game, and I would say it was probably one of the most fun out of all the games that I played for this video. The gameplay is crisp, the game is simple to learn, and I really do like the art style, even with visual clarity issues. The progression is good, there's a decent amount of game modifiers to change things up, and if it didn't have the AI music, I wouldn't have many hesitations recommending it. The demo is available for this one now, and the game is due to come out on June 6th. Alright, and that is all I have for you today, so thank you so much for watching. Also, thanks to the developers who sent their games to me. Again, if you're interested in any of them, there will be links to them in the description of the video. If you like this video, then please leave it a like and consider subscribing if you're new. Thanks again to my YouTube members whose continued support is always appreciated. That's all for now, so I'll see you all soon for some Summer Game Fest content, as we are almost in June. See you then.